All right, are we all on? Welcome to our first new music lunch and learn. Thank you so much for joining us today. We're really excited about these and hope these are something fun that we can do with our membership. My name is Kelly Johnson. I teach at the University of Central Arkansas, and I also am principal clarinet of the Arkansas Symphony Orchestra. Oh, and thank you to Jessica as well for setting this up. Appreciate you facilitating this, Jessica. So today the plan is that we're going to talk about two subjects, clarinet voicing, which I'm going to discuss, and then Dr. Nichols, will turn it over to him, and he will be discussing multiphonics. So before we even start talking about voicing, I'd like to define it. When I mentioned this to my mom, she thought I meant voicing chords, which is also a voicing exercise. But voicing to me on the clarinet means adjusting your tongue in your oral cavity in order to play with a beautiful tone, in order to learn flexibility so that we can play incredibly advanced high range, flexibility so that we can play multiphonics. But on a more base level, just having good tongue shape and oral cavity can also help us sound good. It can help us have better pitch. And it can help us with our articulation. And so when I talk about voicing, that's what I mean, and that's what I'm referring to. And to give you a little history of my interest in this topic, in high school, I played piano and clarinet, and I also took voice lessons. And the voice teacher I had at the time was trying to increase my range higher. And in that process, and the things she was talking about and the analogies she was using, I was like, oh, well, that's what I do to play up to high G on the clarinet. Those are, I'm trying to raise my tongue. I'm trying to voice more up here. And so that clicked for me. That made sense for me. And so that was my initial interest. And then, of course, in undergraduate school, my professor, Dr. Coleman, and I talked about proper tongue shape and thinking E's we go higher on the clarinet. And so you may think, oh, I've never talked about voicing. But if someone's ever said, think E as you go higher, that's voicing. Okay. So you have, maybe just not in the same words. And so I did a lot of that in undergrad. And then when I went to graduate school, I studied with Robert Spring at Arizona State. And he did specific voicing exercises like bugle calls and other things as a precursor to extreme altissimo and multiphonics and quarter tones and all of those fun techniques that we on the New Music Committee think are really cool. And Dr. Nichols and I were just talking before this, and we hope that this will be fun for you. We're going to be creating some interesting sounds and doing some non-normal stuff, and we kind of think it's fun. So I hope you enjoy this. So basically, voicing, of course, involves position of the tongue. So I just want to briefly talk about tongue position. And so I like to describe tongue position from the back, the middle, and the tip. I think all three parts of the tongue play an important role. And if you were to say the word key, that kind of helps us think about a good higher tongue position. So when I say key, what I feel on the back of my tongue is at the very back sides of my tongue are touching the inside bottoms of my upper molar. Key. I can feel that as a landmark. And when I have students who like to drop their tongue really low, then we can talk about key and that landmark and trying to find that landmark. The clarinet does like higher tongue position than some of the other woodwind instruments. When I say key, the middle of my tongue is a little higher in my mouth. It's, not all the way up to the roof of my mouth, but it's higher. And the reason why we like to think that's a little bit E as we go higher, if this is the roof of your mouth, if you're blowing the same air but you raise your tongue, you're making that opening smaller. So that's going to help the air go faster. So by thinking E's, we're going higher. The reed needs to vibrate faster. That's your air and your tongue are working together to make that happen. And again, when I say key, that also places the tip of my tongue a little bit more in the middle of my mouth. Not so much at the bottom, not super high, but kind of in the middle. And if the tip is kind of in the middle, that's kind of where the reed is, so that ideally we can be in a position where we can easily reach the reed. And so I like key, I like the syllable E. I occasionally have trouble, sometimes when we're working on this in lessons, sometimes E suggests super tight. And the important thing to remember is that we just need to keep a natural tongue position. So I like to think about an umlaut where, like in the French or German language, where it's two vowels put together. So E with the tongue, but oo with the lips. So it's kind of an oo, a more relaxed E. Sometimes if E just brings on tension, then experiment with some other syllables. You might find a different syllable that feels more comfortable or more natural for you. Okay, so with that being said, I have attached an article. This was written by a friend and a colleague, Dr. Scott Wright. He teaches at the University of Kentucky. And he visited my school years ago and brought this article, and I use it all the time in my teaching. I use it all the time with younger students when they're having trouble getting up to a high F or high G. We start some of those exercises then. If I feel like I've got a student that's really got a tight embouchure, we'll use those to work on relaxing this and letting the tongue do more of the work. But I definitely use these when my students are getting ready to do multiphonics and some extreme altissimo register. So if you'd like to open it up, I really love this article. I think Dr. Wright really put everything together in a logical manner. He does talk about proper voicing position at the beginning, and of course you're free to read through that. It's a great article. And you're free to share this as well. I have his permission to share this and use this as it will help people. Okay. All right. So the first thing that I'd like to talk about in this article is the exercise number 1. And they're called thumb drops. And these I find are the easiest to do first. So if you've never done anything weird like this on your clarinet before, these thumb drops are a great place to start. So you all remember when you started playing clarinet, you'd play a low note and then you'd add the thumb to get the upper register. And so he suggests just starting with that. And just kind of, doing what we know already. And then from there, once you hit the higher note, the idea of the thumb drops is to take the thumb off the register key, but still keep the high note. Okay, so I'll start with the C. I'm going to play an F and then a C, and then I'm going to actually take my register key off the horn. It'll make it a little flat, but I should still be able to keep the C. And the idea is that you work those down as low as you can go. And for some of my students, we can only do a couple, and then we need to work on going further down. For some students, they can automatically go all the way down to B, the EB combination. So that's kind of the first step, and it's a nice way to start. It does get harder the further away you get from the register key. It gets a little hard to keep those notes up. When that's going well, then you can add the next layer of this exercise, which is to do a C thumb drop and then to try to go all the way down the C major scale without the register key down. And some days I can do this really easily, and some days it's a little harder, so we'll see how it turns out this morning. There, yeah, I kept it. And so so that's a little more challenging. And that's the next step to add. And if you happen to drop out, okay, that's fine. Just kind of evaluate, okay, I dropped out on the G. So tomorrow or the next day, I'm going to work on trying to get down to the F. There are some things that I do think about to try and keep that upper note when the register key is not down. So for one thing, and I have very expressive eyebrows apparently, but one thing is to think about keeping your eyebrows up, kind of think about keeping lifted here. I have a lot of students who try to push and force it to happen here, but if your throat is tight at all, it won't forgive you. And so we've got to be relaxed here and let that happen. So thinking about approaching from above, sometimes thinking about getting on top of the mouthpiece, visualizing, if you can maybe sing the scale first and then try and play it, those are some things that can kind of help that happen. The final step of this exercise, and this is my favorite one, is to do a thumb drop on C and then add some articulation. And for some people, that easily and instantly can happen. For some people, we'll drop immediately down to the low F. And if we drop down to the F while we're articulating, that tells me that, okay, we need to work on keeping our back, middle, and tip in the right position when we start to use our tongue. So that's the first one that I introduced to my younger students, and I found that it helps, again, not just high range, but also just kind of helps tone and tonguing. The second exercise that I'd like to discuss in the article is the sixth exercise. That's number 4, the fourth exercise in the article. And on this one, again, when you first learned your high notes, we would play thumb 1, 2, 3, E, and then we'd lift the index finger to get the C sharp. And that's how this one starts as well. And then after you play the sixth, then you add the index finger back down and still try to keep the C sharp. And then you try to pop up from E to C sharp without lifting the index at all. And you can extend that one up as well. Pop-ups are not in the article, but I really like these. You finger a thumb F, you think ah on the F, and then without adding the register key, you're going to think E to pop up to a C, and then you think ah again to get back down to the F. And those are kind of fun if you have a good handle on those others first. And I'm running out of time. I have one more to talk about, and that's the bugle calls. That's exercise number 7. These I did extensively in graduate school, and they're really fun. You get to cross your legs. So you're going to cross your leg and plug the bell, and then you have to lean back a little bit. I don't know if you can see how I've got my legs crossed and the bell plugged. And you're going to start on a D, a long D, and you're going to try and get the 2 harmonics above the D. And what you're looking for is movement here, kind of in the very back of the tongue, top of the throat. I have kids who like to cheat and lip it. I have kids who cheat and like to huff it. So if you see movement here or movement here, then that's not quite the right idea. And you can cheat from the D if you're having trouble getting the first harmonic. You can add this left pinky key to get the first harmonic. You just have to take it off for the upper one. So, and I'm going to try and turn to the side so that you can hopefully see some movement here. So each harmonic kind of has its own place. I kind of feel like my tongue is doing this, and I even let students feel this, to feel what's moving if they're having trouble doing it correctly. So at any rate, if you want to learn more about this, we will have breakout rooms at the end of the session. But for now, I would like to go ahead and pass this on to Dr. Nichols so he can go ahead and tell us about multiphonics.
Thank you so much, Dr. Johnson. And again, welcome to the New Music Committee event. This is our first Lunch and Learn. And thank you to Jessica for setting everything up and getting things advertised so that there's a nice crowd here. It was really important for Dr. Johnson to talk about voicing before we get into my topic, which is multiphonics. I've got a little PowerPoint here with some examples, so I hope you have your clarinet handy, because we can start to do a couple of them together. And if you want to do the multiphonic breakout room, we'll do a few more. So I'm calling this Multiphonics a primer. So first thing, if you're not familiar with multiphonics, it simply means multiple pitches at any given time. So in string or keyboard performance, this has been commonly heard for a long time. either in rapid succession with a sustain or simultaneously, such as the multiple stops that we hear in the unaccompanied works of Johann Sebastian Bach for violin, cello, etc., or really any chord played on a keyboard instrument like a harpsichord, piano, or organ. In woodwind performance, this has become common practice, but is far more recent in origin for our instruments. Perhaps maybe only the last half of the 20th century have we really started to explore it, and I'd say basically now it's not an extended technique. This is really just technique now. On the clarinet, multiphonics are particularly interesting because our instruments' acoustics are different from the other woodwind instruments. And the piano and a lot of other instruments. Rather, we skip every other harmonic in the overtone series. So as Dr. Johnson demonstrated, when you play a low note and you add our register key, it pops up a 12th. A lot of clarinet players also play saxophone, so I like to just use this comparison. On the saxophone, if you play a low note and press the octave key, it jumps up an octave. So that's our special thing. So without getting too complex, I'd like to say that on multiphonics and the clarinet, they tend to sound they kind of sound hollow because there's missing stuff. And they also may only be stable at particular dynamics. So on some of the other woodwind instruments, you can get more like tonal sounding like chords. We have a hard time with that. There are a couple that work out, but it's kind of by accident rather than the norm, if you will. So I just want to get everyone started on some multiphonics today. And I should say that we need to have the voicing vocabulary that Dr. Johnson introduced. This flexibility is requisite as we practice multiphonics. How to get started. So the first thing is that we can use conventional fingerings with intentional misvoicing. And I stole these from Ronald Caravan's writings. There's a bibliography a little bit later, so just took a couple quick pictures here. So I'm going to acknowledge that. But this first one, you'll see 4 pitches in sequence at a relatively soft dynamic of mezzo piano. That N means normal, which is why it's in quotations there. So you can just play up and down chromatically. That would be step 1. I think that's really important because we have to hear it, right? We have to hear what we're going for. Then you'll see with the fingerings for clarion A, B, C, and B, but it's very, very soft, the same written pitches. So I would call this is intentionally misvoicing clarion fingerings. This is accomplished by using kind of slow, steady air and probably a lower kind of tongue position. It sounds pretty funky. I think it's pretty cool to realize that most clarinetists already know how to do all of this. It's just they're working towards not doing that because we have to make that beautiful characteristic clarinet sound before we get into the quote unquote weird stuff. This is also beneficial if you're not really kind of like, I don't know about this. This is weird. I think it's really beneficial fundamentally for you to be able to do these things. Because by learning how to make these quote-unquote voicing errors, we learn how not to make them. So our traditional performance abilities, like to play a Beethoven symphony or the Mozart concerto with a beautiful sound, there's also a positive impact on that. Also, it's best to know how to do something and choose not to, rather than simply not to be able to do it. And this stuff just pops up in music now. It didn't always used to, but you know, sometimes you just get a piece of music, like an orchestra has like a random multiphonic in it. It's interesting. This is really just technique now. It's part of our toolbox. Okay, so I would say that was the fundamental tone with the register key depressed. So we're going to go on to the next step here, which is to slur from that fundamental tone with the register key depressed and kind of try to find it. And it looks like this. So we'll see we just play a thumb F And then we use that weird fingering. It's not a weird fingering. Then we try to finger a clarion A, but we intentionally play the thumb F sounding kind of pitch. And you try to keep it in the same register. It's tricky to do, especially the first couple until you get kind of the hang of it. Just remember, slow, diffuse, steady air. Stay relaxed. This would be the second measure. And the third measure. What I really like about this is it's increasing my awareness of where my tongue is in my mouth. Like by intentionally putting it low, then I figure out how to put it high. If you're finding yourself having trouble, for example, getting notes in the clarion to speak immediately, cleanly, and clearly, this could really be a helpful sort of review exercise for you. My next step would be actually to start in the clarion register and find the low register. It's good to find either approach because in music, when you see multiphonics, you could be coming from a low note to create a multiphonic, or you could be coming from a high note to create a multiphonic. So it's a different skill set. So here we're simply going to play in the clarion register and then try to make it drop, if you will, without leaving the register key though. So that's how it's a little bit different from the drop exercises that Dr. Johnson showed us. You really start to figure out the different voicings that are necessary for different registers and dynamics. Now, this would be kind of like the 0 to 60 approach, which I did in January for this ICA Plays On thing. So this is an elaboration of that presentation. Here we get from the fundamental to the clarion, and then we intentionally create a dyad. And this is that weird ghostly sound that like the third clarinets in the elementary school band will make as they're trying to play above the break for the first time. Maybe. Intentionally play the low note, intentionally play the high note, and then try to get the two together. So that was just a quick demo. And my last thing is just a couple tips. So for approaching a first one with special fingering. So here's you're going from a normal fingering and then you're adding some fingers while keeping the same pitch. And then sort of deleting things until we get to a multiphonic. These fingerings are particularly easy to get a first multiphonic. So I really like Caravan's writings, and I'll have a slide with some additional resources for you to jot down because of how progressive it is. It's naturally progressive, so it encourages you to do more. next one. These are really fun to teach if you like to teach clarinet lessons and voicing, because there is no way you're going to get out of this without sounding bad. So it relaxes you and you can have more fun with the clarinet, if you will. All right. And I did want to give you a couple tips, some takeaways. It's kind of a demo, and there's some fingerings there you can access and try that on your own. So often something to know is that in recent literature, the multiphonic will often include a fingering suggestion. That's not always the case, so you do need to have resources if you're going to play music like this. The most comprehensive that I know of is the Philip Reffelt New Directions for Clarinet Revised Edition, which is a great resource guide. He also goes further into detail about like which multiphonics work at which volumes, and it's a very interesting study. That said, just because it's in there, it might change for you because everyone's equipment is different. So the response tendencies and volume tendencies are going to vary. First step with any multiphonic, you have that fingering in front of you, just like press all the buttons and try it, see if it works. Sometimes they'll just work and it'll be really easy, and then you can move on with your life. Don't try to fix something that is not broken. It's just not necessary, because you invariably are going to find ones that are not so easy, and that's where we'll have to put our attention. I like to use this process, like say I have a really tricky multiphonic that's just not speaking for me. The one this morning that was bugging me was to get a multiphonic using 1 2 1 2 and the thumb key, which is like the fake fingering from the like 5-key clarinet for C sharp, or 12th above for A flat. It's like the emergency only A flat. Sometimes it's taught in the French methods. You know, if you are in a fingering trap and there's just no other way to get to that note, that's the way you go. I was having a really hard time with this one this morning, so I'll use this and let's see what happens. But I like to use that fingering, and if I can't get the 3 pitches at once that I'm looking for, which in this case are something close to a low D flat, something close to a clarion A flat, and then something close to a altissimo D flat. If I can't get that, I'm going to try to access each pitch individually, so like the low, middle, and high. I don't want to belabor that. It's kind of like torture for everyone else. But once I have accessed all of them successfully, I'll try it again without really accommodating to figure out which pitch sort of sticks out, or you know, which pitch does it tend to go with. So what I discover with this is that the high pitch tends to stabilize naturally. So in order to get a multiphonic, I have to voice low. If you make this discovery in your practice, it might be helpful in that multiphonic to highlight or circle that pitch in the music just as a reminder to voice that way, to make any adjustments with the shape of your oral cavity or the inside embouchure or your external embouchure might need to be like a little bit freer or more flexible. Sometimes I found a word or a vowel sound that could help me create the desired multiphonic with greater ease right away. And hey, be creative. I was taught ooh with the lips and ee with the tongue and all that stuff to make a pure, beautiful sound. And that's really important. But to create a multiphonic, it's probably not going to work for everything. Some really strange vowel sounds like that we'd say don't do that, like to a middle school or an elementary school student, like who or how or something more open, or just get creative and see what happens. Those are just some suggestions to get you started and hopefully troubleshoot some things as you encounter them in your early process. Oh, and breath attacks are your friend with this. Especially if it doesn't work with the tongue, try it with the breath. That might help you get the voicing. Um, Here's some additional resources. I actually use those little couple measures from the Caravan Preliminary Exercises and Etudes in Contemporary Techniques for clarinet. It's kind of a go-to. It has lots of great information about quarter tones, timbre variation, multiphonics, all sorts of things. Also, he wrote some etudes, the polychromatic diversions, that actually make really nice kind of undergraduate recital pairings. Like I like to have my students who haven't done anything with contemporary techniques maybe pick two of these etudes, and they make kind of a nice contemporary set that's interesting for the audience too. There's one where you actually depress the pedal on the piano and you play. It's really cool. Just released this week, a collaboration by Andy Hudson and Roger Zare, Elements of Contemporary Clarinet Technique. That's a pretty cool book. It just came in the mail a couple days ago, and I looked through it, and there was some great information about multiphonics and all that. So it's nice to see new resources coming out like that. And of course, it's really the standard instructional manual or desktop reference, which is Philip Reffelt's New Directions for Clarinet, revised in 1994. I think there are more resources out there, but these are just a really good sampling. Thanks so much.
Okay, do you guys want to work out into the breakout rooms?
Yeah, why don't, there was one quick question I saw in the chat that maybe we could address that.
Go ahead.
It was an equipment thing. So before we break out, maybe we could address that. Someone asked about using cane reeds or synthetic for these exercises.
Um, First of all, I do like Leger reeds. I think as far as synthetic reeds go, I personally find that wooden reeds are a little more flexible for me when I'm doing these kinds of things. The other thing is that I kind of mentioned before, this has to be really relaxed, and sometimes the Legers don't always feel as comfortable for me as a wooden reed as well. But I don't see why they wouldn't work on a Leger. Dr. Nichols.
I haven't played on a I don't play on cane reeds anymore, but you can do I think just as well on one or the other. I think your equipment shouldn't be an impediment. I do caution you against using a really hard to blow setup though, especially if you're getting new to this. If you're new to this, it's important that you have flexibility. I would err on the side of lighter to get started, and then if you're feeling more comfortable with it and you want the more resistant setup, then you could try that and see if it still works.
So another idea, whatever's most comfortable, I think, is best.
Yeah, I'll actually put these. Somebody asked about the resources, so I can quick copy and paste them from the slide.
I hadn't heard about the brand new book. Thanks for putting that in.
It's very nice, and it was interesting to see that Roger Zare is a really reputable composer. To see a clarinetist and a composer like that working together, that's really I always like seeing collaboration. I think it's so cool.
Yeah, Carol has a question. Carol.
Hi, everybody. Thank you so much. This is great. I love this. It's so great that you're doing this. I have a question about the what you're just talking about with the voicing and the tongue position. And I find you had said towards the end, which was Dr. Nichols, which was going to be one of my questions, the air start. In other words, I am starting the pitch with my air. I can either think of my tongue position or my air position, correct? Like how I'm directing my air. I've been sort of told that. But once I try to articulate, that's assuming I'm bringing my tongue forward, then I have to readjust again, right? Is that a little bit more of an advanced thing when I'm trying to blow these 12ths, if you will? Do you understand the question?
Absolutely. I don't think that when you get into these techniques, and I could be off the mark here, so if this doesn't clarify, I don't think that we have to add the tom. If you can get an immediate response with the sound that you're looking for, I don't think that we have to go that extra step to add D or T or anything like that. So the breath attack in a way could be good enough in this particular circumstance. If you're looking for a really immediate, instant response for an ensemble situation, that could be a little bit different. I'm
Right.
not
So
particularly opinionated about it, though.
I think that I understand the concept. I can duplicate the concept. I think my body is remembering where I need to voice, but I'm not sure whether I'm doing it properly, let's say in an articulation situation. How do I get this carryover from these exercises into my regular playing with reliability and constancy? What do I need to do?
Can I just say that for me, a lot of times when I'm playing multiphonics, I'm having to use much warmer air than normal, which is definitely going to change the way I normally tongue, because when I'm tonguing, I'm thinking cold, fast air, and now all of a sudden I'm thinking hot, and I'm trying to keep it nice and warm, because sometimes if you blow too hard, you lose your multiphonic. There is a little window where it's going to forgive you, and so maybe what you're asking is how do I tongue in that warm air position that is not normal to me, and maybe that's why it's hard for you to wrap your head around, because that's not a normal position, if that makes sense. So
Yes.
to me, that's how I wrap my head around it. Okay, so this is a different tongue position now. I'm using warm air. This is much lower, and then that makes more sense and helps me find my way.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
That was a great question. Thank you.
Yeah, excellent question. And my husband is a band director. He plays trombone. He thinks it's ridiculous to hear me practice this stuff, because it doesn't sound, as Dr. Nichols said, it doesn't sound like how we normally want to sound. But that's why it's so fun. It's because it's different and kind of cool and funky.